Hey, it's Jen Vax with YourColorStyle.com. This is part one of a three-part series that we're going to talk about contrast. Now, contrast is something that I feel is really important when we're creating an overall look. When we talk about color analysis, we are talking about finding colors and patterns that are, I'll air quote, flattering on you. But what does that really mean, flattering? In my opinion, it means that it is everything is in harmony, and everything kind of fits in the whole picture. Your hair, your eyes, your makeup, your lips, your skin, the clothes you're wearing, everything is in harmony. So let me give you an example in relation to contrast. In contrast, there are three different ways you can think about contrast. So for this first one, for part one, we're going to talk about values, light and dark. It's what you immediately think of when you think of contrast. So we're going to start out with the basic one first, but make sure you pay attention to part two and part three, which will be coming up in the next couple of days. Tomorrow is part two and the next day is part three, because you'll learn a different way of thinking about contrast as well. So for value, we're talking about the difference between something that's light and dark. The difference between those two. So for example, I have here two cards from the Color Fans. This is white, this is black. And they are the furthest apart in the spectrum, if you will, of tints and shades. So that is high contrast. If the difference between the light and the dark, two different colors, is great, you're going to have high contrast. Black and white is the easiest to describe. You could do less contrast by finding a medium gray and black, and now the difference is less, so it's less contrast. So when you're looking at patterns, like how would you apply this to clothes, right? When you're looking at patterns, stripes, or even just two different solids, you can look and see the difference between how light one is versus how dark another is, and see if it is a low contrast, medium, or high. So for example, this right here, you have a cocoa brown and a black, and they are really, really close as far as darkness goes, very small difference. So that would be a low contrast. You could do the same. Let's see if I can find a lighter, here we go. You could do the airplane behind me. You could do a gray and a sand color like this. Very low difference between how light or medium these are. So it's a low contrast, okay? Now, what does this mean? So when you're looking at patterns, you can decide if that pattern has lots of differences, a large difference in light to dark, or medium or low. Why it's relevant to color analysis and to the clothes that you might want to wear for yourself is, again, it's the harmony thing. So if you yourself are naturally low contrast, like me, light hair, light skin, light eyes, not a whole lot of difference between these two. In fact, if you were to grayscale me right now, I'd be pretty much all one tint of gray. I'm low contrast. That means that I look best, and in the best meaning in harmony, in balance, with low contrast clothes, low contrast patterns, and low contrast just from different pieces together, solids as well. Okay, so for me, wearing anything that's high contrast doesn't look exactly right. It's a little off. And I don't feel right in it either, but it's because I'm not high contrast. And so it's just off balance. I'm not really in harmony with everything. So for you, if maybe you're someone who has a higher contrast or needs that higher contrast, well, that's different, right? Now you can wear those high contrast patterns and it's going to feel really good. So let's say you have really dark hair, very fair skin as one example of having that high contrast. Someone that's got more medium skin with medium brown hair and maybe darker eyes is going to have medium to low contrast. So it's not about being fair. It's about the difference between your skin, your hair, and sometimes your eyes as well. So that's your personal contrast. Okay. One other thing to keep in mind, though, So I've shown you here things like, black and white are high contrast. And so, or any other, colors, the difference, right? That's the level of contrast. But make sure that you pay attention not only to the pattern's contrast that you're going to wear, but also how it contrasts with yourself. So I'm low contrast, right? So if I go and I find a pattern that is low contrast, okay, first of all, you can say, well, that's a win. You're low contrast, the pattern's low contrast, it's a win. The problem is that these are two fairly dark colors, and dark colors on me creates a higher contrast. I am light, these are dark, that creates a higher contrast, and now we're off balance again. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't wear dark colors. I wear dark colors all the time. It's a choice of creating that contrast when I want to. But I'm pointing this out because I could easily see someone saying, well, I found a low contrast top, but it still doesn't feel right. And it's possible because it may be different. It might be the wrong contrast with you, right? And so you got to kind of play with that a little bit. So when I talk about contrast, the reason I feel that it's so important is that you are looking at the patterns in the clothes and how the different pieces are working together, as well as the harmony of yourself included along with it. Okay, so that is one way of looking at contrast, which is the values, the difference between the lightest and the darkest color in a pattern or within pieces, and between yourself and your clothing, and even in your makeup. You can even consider contrast when you're thinking about how dark you want your hair to go or something like that. So that is part one of this 3-part series on contrast. Tomorrow we talk about a different type of contrast that you may not have thought about, but makes all the difference when you're pulling your outfits together to create the statement that you want. I'm Jen Vax, and thank you very much for watching.